What's up people, and welcome back to another video here on my YouTube channel. My name is Marvin, and on today's video I got a big question that I'm really looking forward to have a look on that video. And it's a very long video, so I think I make two parts out of it. But we are watching about how every NFL team got their identity and also their name, so pretty excited. Some thoughts about some names, but I'm looking really forward how the New York Jets got their name, because for me this is like, yes, surreal. So I cannot make any combination on why somebody has to name the New York Jets. But yeah, pretty excited about that one as well as the others, and I would say we hop right into that video.
The NFL is currently made up of 32 different franchises. But did you know over 75 have existed in league history?
What? Okay, first of all, 75 is a very big number, and I think this is just possible when you see, for example, the Cleveland Browns franchise trade to Baltimore, then founding a new franchise in Cleveland again, which was then named the Browns again. When this counts as 3 and not 2 franchises, then I think that number is legit. If not, doesn't really make sense for me. But yeah, let's see. The history was long.
It's the official evolution of the NFL, 100 years in the making. The NFL was born in 1920, known originally as the American Professional Football Association. It started with 14 teams, 12 of them clumped together in the Midwest, 2 others playing in New York.
Join this group, you had to put up $100 for a franchise.
You notice many of the early franchises didn't even have official team logos. That's because teams were so informal back then.
Okay, there are cities that don't even know that they exist.
Jim Thorpe was unanimously elected president because of the name recognition that he could garner for this National Pro Football League.
Of the 14 original teams, only 2 would stick around to celebrate the league's 100th anniversary.
But let's be honest, what is your thought now? What's the coolest logo in that area? For me, it's clearly the Stanleys. I just like that logo. It's pretty old school, but I love that color combination of orange and blue.
The Decatur Staleys, known today as the Chicago Bears, and the oldest team in the NFL, the Chicago Cardinals, who have since built their nest in Arizona.
The story behind the Cardinals name really goes back to Chris O'Brien when he purchased the uniforms that the Cardinals were going to wear. He purchased them from the Chicago Maroons, and they were faded, and somebody referred to the jerseys as maroon color, and he said, those aren't maroon, that's cardinal red, and that Cardinal name stuck.
Wow, but for me, the Cleveland Bears in that time, the Chicago Bears in that time, looks pretty similar to logos in the MLB nowadays.
Undefeated at 8-0-3. Yes, 3 ties. The Pros weren't just the league's first champions either. They were also the first team in the league to break the color barrier.
The Akron Pros are one of those teams that are lost to history, but Fritz Pollard was both a player and
what
a coach
was
for
that?
Akron
The
Pros
type
team.
of football looked
and
weird.
Since diamond-filled Super Bowl rings were clearly not the rage just yet, all the Pros players received this tiny gold football pendant for their efforts. The Pros were also the first and last recipients of the league's championship trophy, known as the Brunswick Balke Colander Cup, which to this day represents one of the greatest mysteries in NFL lore. It was lost after that first season, and this is the only known picture.
What?
Following the league's
Somebody
first year,
stole the
2
trophy.
teams renamed themselves and one
What?
moved. The Decatur Staleys, setting up shop in Chicago and winning their first ever championship while they were at it. The Chicago Tigers, meanwhile, folded, but 8 new teams joined. The league was now up to 21 teams.
And the first name of a team that still exists today is, when you want to see it as that, the New York Wrigley Giants and the Green Bay Packers. Crazy.
Still located in Midwestern and Eastern states. Several of the new additions didn't last long. The Tonawanda Cardex, holding the ultimate one-hit wonder crown, playing just 1 league game, thereby making it the shortest-lived franchise in NFL history.
One
the Dexys
season.
Midnight Runners of teams. The Green Bay Packers, however, would stick around, cementing itself as one of the most storied franchises in the league.
In Green Bay, Wisconsin, a team was founded with $500 put up by a meatpacking company. They became known as the Packers.
The Green Bay Packers were one of those first teams that stadium was constructed with football as its main sport being
Hey, I
played
love
in
this history
No other team in the league has played in the same
flashbacks.
city under the same name.
This is
for
crazy
as
how
long
we developed over these years. It's just insane.
as Green Bay has. Following the 21 season, 7 teams left the league and 4 new ones joined. The Milwaukee Badgers, the Oorang Indians, the Racine Legion, and the Toledo Maroons.
Never heard of them.
The Staleys, meantime, made a good call and changed their name to the Bears. Their
Okay,
owner,
now we
George
have
Hallis,
3
picked Bears
franchises
because they originally
who
were
still
playing
have their
games
names
in the
today.
same stadium as the Chicago Cubs. Hallis not only wanted to connect his new team to the more established baseball franchise, but he also reasoned that football players in general were bigger than baseball players, so the name made sense on multiple levels. But the even bigger name change that took place that year was the
Am I the
Leafs.
only one who is really shocked about how they played these days? They played without protection, just pure football,
The American
without any
Professional Football
equipment.
Association was
Crazy.
out to be
Just
known
these
forever on
helm-like
as the
things
National
on their
Football
heads.
League.
I think a lot of that comes from wanting to be looked at or viewed as a national organization.
As the 1923 season got underway, it did so without the Evansville Crimson Giants, who bowed out. The Cleveland Indians, Duluth Kellys, and St. Louis All-Stars all checked in. In 1924, 5 teams left. 3 joined, the cities of Frankfurt, Kenosha, and Kansas City all being granted membership in the league. A year later, though, Kenosha, Racine, and Minneapolis all left. The Blues changed their name to the Cowboys, Canton rejoined, and Detroit, Providence, Pottsville, and New York were all added to the mix.
I don't understand
The Giants,
anything.
the lone
What?
team to
This is
stick,
like a big
making them the
mixture
4th
of
oldest
like
team
everything. So many name
in the league.
changes and
Tim Mara
so
set
weird.
up his storefront in the Polo Grounds, located on Upper Manhattan's Coogan's Bluff.
The New York Giants name came about really to attach pro football team with their Major League Baseball counterpart, trying to gain some of that
Big
fandom,
stadium for these
from
days.
Major League Baseball.
That means ultimately the name Giants was inspired by all the skyscrapers in New York. In 1926, 3 teams changed their names, including the league's first ever champs, the Akron Pros, who switched to the Indians. 3 franchises were dropped, but the Racine Legion came back as the Tornadoes, and 4 others were also added. The Brooklyn Lions, the Hartford Blues, the Louisville Colonels, and the Los Angeles Buccaneers.
What? The Buccaneers
Marking the first
in
time the league had a
LA?
team out west, although they never actually played any games in LA.
Ultimately, the LA Buccaneers played as a traveling team and really took up shop in Chicago. Played out of that city and then traveled as a barnstorming team, really.
The NFL really shook things up the following season when it got rid of more than half of its member clubs. The Cleveland Bulldogs were back, and the New York Yankees were added. 12 teams now making up the young league. And yes, I said the New York Yankees. The NFL was down to 10 teams.
I
the
thought
next
that we were talking about the NFL, and now we have the Yankees included, also the Cleveland Indians. So maybe they switched later to baseball, or they still provided American football and baseball at their franchise level. I don't know, but very weird.
Duluth and Buffalo losing their spots in the league, while the Cleveland Bulldogs moved to Detroit and became the Wolverines. But they didn't last long, one of 3 teams to fold up shop the next season. Buffalo came back, and the Orange Tornadoes, Staten Island Stapletons, and Minneapolis Red Jackets all joined. Come on in. Now, as the NFL began its 2nd decade in existence, the turnover of teams was starting to slow down a little bit. 3 franchises were dropped, 2 joined. The Portsmouth Spartans, who are known today as the Detroit Lions and are the 5th oldest team in the NFL. In 1931, the Cleveland Indians were back. However, the Red Jackets and Tornadoes dropped out. 1932
What?
was another
But
significant
I would be
blip.
very interested in why these franchises were dropping out. So, what were the reasons for dropping out and dropping in again? Because there's so much shift in that whole scenario. This is, I don't know, very weird.
On the NFL timeline, The Indians, Steamrollers, and Yellow Jackets departed, and the Boston Braves were added, which you know today as the Washington Redskins. But by adding only one team and losing 3, the league was down to 8 teams. It was the smallest the league ever got.
You had the league really trying to protect itself and stay with fewer teams but have them more successful.
Then in 1933, the Cincinnati Reds were introduced to pro football, along with 2 Pennsylvania franchises that would establish permanent roots in the league. The Pittsburgh Pirates, who eventually changed their name to the Steelers,
And now we have the Pirates in
Philadelphia
baseball.
Eagles.
It's funny when you read the stories leading up to the first game that the team played. WWII was very optimistic. We're a first-year team, but we're going to surprise people. Well, they went out and they played their first game against the New York Giants and lost 56-0.
Philadelphia owners Burt Bell and Lud Ray settled on the name Eagles in honor of the symbol used by the National Recovery Act that was part of Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal that followed in the wake of the Great Depression. The 33 season was also when the owner of the Boston Braves decided it was time for a new name.
George Preston Marshall wanted to stick with the Native American theme, so he didn't want to keep the Braves name because that was the name of the baseball franchise, so he chose the Redskins.
That season was also the first in which divisions were created, which set up the first official NFL championship game.
Oh, okay. I love how the stadiums are constructed when you look at the background here in these pictures.
Record at the end of the season. The Bears would represent the West, the Giants the East, with Chicago beating New York 23-21 for the title.
That game really was the beginning of
Insane.
popularity of pro football.
But now
The
we're
following
coming
year
to the
saw the
points
same
where you
exact
know
10
the
teams
franchise is a
return,
little bit
marking
better.
the first time in the league's history there were no changes. But mid-season, the Cincinnati Reds folded and were replaced by the St. Louis Gunners for the last 3 games. It would be the only 3 games they would play as an NFL franchise. Also in 1934, the Portsmouth Spartans moved to Detroit and changed their name to the Lions. The name was inspired by baseball's Detroit Tigers, though the team had a different explanation. Quote, "The lion is considered the monarch of the jungle, and we hope to be the monarch of the league."
Whoa, okay.
From 1935 to 1936,
Hopefully
the
that
same
pays
9
out
teams
anytime
remained,
soon.
But it was in 36 that the NFL held its first ever draft.
Before 1936, every player coming out of college was a free agent. And a lot of times those players were going to the teams with the biggest checkbook.
The Eagles used the first ever pick on Chicago Maroons halfback and first ever winner of the Heisman Trophy, Jay Berwanger. But Berwanger would never play it down in the NFL. The Bears, who acquired his rights from the Eagles, were not able to meet Berwanger's salary demands, which ultimately led him to take a job in sales for a rubber company. It's true.
What?
1937, the Boston Redskins made the move to Washington, and the NFL grew back to 10 teams, awarding a franchise to the Cleveland
Yeah,
Rams.
we have the Rams
These
now,
are the
okay.
same Rams that call Los Angeles home today.
In
The
Ohio.
name Rams came about because their
So
GM at the
weird.
time, Damon Buzz Wetzel's favorite college football team, had always been the Fordham Rams, so they simply copied it. As the 30s came to a close, the league was starting to stabilize. There were no changes to the NFL landscape in either 1938 or 39. But 1939 was monumental for the future of the league, even if its participants didn't realize it at the time.
The Brooklyn Dodgers hosted the Philadelphia Eagles before a crowd of 13,000 fans. Few, if any, in attendance even noticed the cameras of NBC station W2XBS. Their presence marked the first ever telecast of a professional football game.
The first ever TV broadcast was only seen in parts of New York, but the seed was planted. The game's financial future, stability, and popularity were all secured with the marriage between the NFL and
Yeah,
television.
this is
The
very
1940
important
season was
nowadays.
significant for
Then
2
you have
reasons.
televised
First, Pittsburgh
sports
traded in the Pirates'
that
nickname.
just builds the
They
brand.
changed their name to the Steelers because of a steel worker ultimately proposed the name Steelers, and that stuck, knowing that the steel industry was so big in that area.
That year also saw the first iteration of the now famous NFL shield.
Yeah, pretty much
the league
didn't change.
unveiling the iconic logo for the very first time. And the Chicago Bears introduced its first official team logo, a black bear running with a football. Now here's the thing. Most NFL teams have updated their logos several times over.
Now we have
If you
it.
pay close attention to the map, you'll see how those updates happen. The league's member clubs continued to remain steady until 1943. That's the season the Cleveland Rams suspended operations for a year, but did not fold. It was due in part because of so many of their players were drafted into military service for World War II, which is also what led the Eagles and Steelers to merge, taking on the unofficial nickname, the Steagles. Yeah!
The Steelers struggled for years and years. It took them a decade and merging with the Philadelphia Eagles before they had their first ever winning season.
In 1944, the Eagles were back on their own.
Eagles had,
But
that's
Pittsburgh
the
was still
team
on
of
shaky
Pennsylvania,
ground, so they
so-
looked for a new team to merge with, and they found a willing partner in the Chicago Cardinals.
Do people in Pennsylvania hate each other? So Steelers fans and Eagles fans, that would be interesting to know. Because you can argue now, 1943, you had a team together. So be friendly to each other. You are more or less on one franchise that you are sticking to.
The combined teams known as Card Pits. The league also added the Boston Yanks. The Cleveland Rams returned, and the Brooklyn Dodgers changed their name to the Brooklyn Tigers. In 45, the Cardinals and Steelers merger was over. Both teams went back on their own.
What? So I make a break here and make the second part now after that, but I'm very confused about the constellations. Also that American football is more or less just happening in 5, 6, 7 states, and then you have franchises coming up on the from the ground and then going back again. The reasons for that would be very, very interesting to know, why they are closing their franchises and why they're building up again after a few years or in another city. Very interesting. And yeah, that was it from that part. Wish you guys a great day and a great week. And yeah, see you guys hopefully in the next part. Goodbye.